Urgent. Putin has been brutally betrayed by his own people. The knife is already at the dictator's throat. A deafening explosion has struck, leaving the Kremlin buried under rubble. Chechen elites are already preparing a march on Moscow. Putin is losing control. A great massacre between the small nations and the Russians has begun. Shock! Moscow is in the crosshairs. There is no escape. At this very moment, Russia's air defense has collapsed like a house of cards. The latest weaponry of the Ukrainian armed forces has burned through the Kremlin's defenses. NATO generals were left speechless by what they saw. Beijing buried Russia in a second. China did the unexpected. She demonstratively tore up all agreements. Putin is returning to Moscow empty-handed. All this and more coming up in our program, Hotspot. Shock. Russia has erupted from several sides at once. Chechnya has declared war on the Kremlin, and Chechen elites are preparing an extremely dangerous march on Moscow. Secret units are sharpening their knives for a final assault on the Kremlin. A great bloody massacre has begun. Putin is losing control. This is the beginning of a civil war. Watch for the details. The collapse of Russia is near.
To respond to the challenge of the times, what must Russia be? Strong. We talk about this face to face with you all the time.
But these conversations will no longer lead to anything. Putin is losing power and trust. A coup in Moscow is inevitable. Over the past 2 years, there has been a significant increase in tensions between the local population and migrants in Russia. Information about conflicts, especially with Chechens, is appearing more and more frequently on social media. Russians are showing with all their being that migrants are not welcome in Putin's country.
I'm a Russian doctor and I accept Russian doctor. If you don't agree with this, you can stick around, find yourself a Russian police officer that you want. Of course. I am a Chechen and you are all sorts. I understand everything. Are you raising us in a military factory or something? And how do you feel about Russians? How do I feel about Russians? Well, how is it? I treat Russians. I want to work here for Russians. And all of you want Russians. Well, if that's what you want, you can understand this question. Why can't I work where I want? And why don't you live in Chechnya?
But then who and where will be left to live? That's an open question. The Chechens are preparing a coup.
We will put in power in Moscow whoever is convenient for us.
This is Ruslan Kutayev, a Chechen public figure and president of the Assembly of Peoples of the Caucasus. He is a supporter of the idea of creating a unified North Caucasian state and often makes predictions about the inevitable collapse of the Russian Federation.
We will be the main force determining how events will unfold in Moscow. We are simply waiting for the main event. Events when chaos begins and when the struggle for power starts.
According to Kutayev, in order for Islamists to seize power in Moscow, it is necessary to wait just a little longer until the political and economic situation in Russia deteriorates sufficiently.
And at 0 hour, when it is time to act in Russia, we will act. And only with our approval will the authority that will govern Russia be established. Only with us, because Russia has its own traditions. Whoever takes the capital, takes the country. And in the capital, no one will govern and no one will come to power without coordinating with us. And we can say this confidently because we have grounds for it.
Although the information space is overflowing with rumors about an imminent change of power, there are still no real signs of an immediate coup in Russia. At the same time, one should not ignore the critical mass of negative factors: prolonged military miscalculations, systemic corruption, and economic decline. It is precisely these factors, together with a hidden split among the elites, that form a solid foundation for the upcoming political destabilization.
When this will happen is extremely difficult to say. I would still, in a very real sense, associate this particular highly possible escalation of internal political processes directly with the eventual death of Vladimir Putin, or perhaps with some specific operations intended to overthrow him, such as a palace coup or the emergence of a designated successor. The more of all this there is, the more really the southern ethnic groups will start to rise up, raise their heads.
It's no secret that the Russian economy has long been heading for the bottom. Already this fall, the country could see a repeat of the situation in 1917, warns communist leader Gennady Zyuganov. Economists note that Russia is facing a typical wartime crisis: rising military spending, a budget deficit, and increasing prices for fuel and food.
Recently, while he was answering various questions, Vladimir Putin himself openly acknowledged and admitted that the Russian economy is currently in a highly challenging and precarious state. This admission most likely further encouraged both the Chechen people and the various peoples of the Caucasus region, in principle, to begin to rise up and assert their independence against the systemic oppression and control that has been strictly imposed by the Moscow administration, at least within the borders of their own historical territories.
A crisis in Russia could erupt at any moment. And will Putin be able to hold on to power then? The question remains open. At this very moment, Moscow is in the crosshairs. There is no more protection. Russia's air defense has collapsed like a house of cards. A true military miracle and a fantastic breakthrough by Ukraine that left NATO generals speechless. The Kremlin is caught in a hopeless trap. How did the Ukrainian defense industry become Russia's worst nightmare? Details coming up. Ukraine has developed its own guided aerial bomb, and this is no longer just an experiment or a paper project. According to Defense Minister Mikhailo Fedorov, the bomb has passed all necessary tests and is ready for combat use.
The development took 17 months of work by Ukrainian engineers. The project was implemented with the support of the Brave One platform, a government initiative focused on the development of military technologies. The main thing is that this is a completely Ukrainian development. It's not a copy of a Western or Russian weapon, but a system created for the realities of modern warfare.
A regular bomb, well, at most, even from maximum altitude, it can travel, 10 to 12 kilometers from a high-speed aircraft, right? Here, the range is already much greater, several times higher, that's it. And that's why such bombs, well, Russia constantly uses them on the front line. In fact, without strikes from such bombs, those Russian meat grinder assaults, when infantry is just thrown at Ukrainian fortifications, well, however many die, that's how many die, right? So that is sometimes during the most intense assault days, up to 150 of these bombs are dropped.
The new Ukrainian UAV is capable of striking fortifications, command posts, and other targets tens of kilometers deep. In other words, this is yet another tool for precision strikes against the enemy without the aircraft having to directly enter a dangerous zone. The Ministry of Defense has already purchased the first batch of new aerial bombs, which means the development is moving into the practical phase and may soon appear at the front.
Well, basically, it allows you to destroy any field fortifications as well as destroy, dugouts and warehouses. And this will provide a substantial and serious help to our ground forces operating on the front lines in repelling relentless Russian assaults. Or during our own counterattacks, we can effectively use a very similar tactic, specifically by striking and neutralizing heavily fortified Russian defensive positions across the battlefield. After that, our drone forces eliminate any survivors using drones, and the assault group captures these positions.
But Ukraine is not stopping there. At the same time, work is underway on new long-range missiles. The European company Destinus, together with the German concern Rheinmetall, is developing the Ruta Block 3 system, a missile with a range of up to 2,000 kilometers.
The new missile will have a warhead weighing 250 kilograms and a modern navigation system that will allow it to operate even under GPS signal jamming. This is important in modern warfare, where electronic warfare systems have become one of the key factors. Its tests are to be conducted specifically in Ukraine. According to the plan, the first flight tests will begin in 2027.
The project is being developed simultaneously in several countries. Destinus's main engineering center is already operating in the Netherlands. Germany will be responsible for mass production and certification, while Ukraine will handle testing, combat adaptation, and the production of certain key components.
70% of the Russian defense, Russian military enterprises, the Russian military-industrial complex, will be within the strike zone. That means we will be able to effectively destroy not only facilities in the border regions and in Crimea, but also reach targets a bit beyond the Urals.
Just a few years ago, the Ukrainian defense sector mainly depended on old Soviet designs. Today, however, the country is developing its own high-tech solutions, from FPV drones and naval unmanned vehicles to aerial bombs and missiles.
There are a lot of components from Western companies. Practically, we now have no restrictions on access to advanced Western technologies. We can use both radio electronic components and individual modules in our weapon systems.
Ukrainian weapons are starting to attract the attention not only of the military, but also of international partners, since a significant portion of these systems has already been tested in real combat conditions. Thus, Ukraine is gradually becoming one of the key producers of modern weaponry in Europe.
Putin was ruthlessly thrown under the bus. The dictator was on his knees begging Xi Jinping to save Russia from disaster, but Beijing hammered the final nail into Russia's coffin. The main and last hope of the bunker dictator was completely destroyed live on air. Putin is returning to Moscow empty-handed. An incredible turn of events. See the details.
And at present, Russian-Chinese relations have truly reached an unprecedented level.
Putin is ready to do anything as long as Xi doesn't abandon him.
I am confident that together we will continue to do everything possible to deepen the Russian-Chinese partnership and good neighborliness.
While the leaders of the US and China were meeting in Beijing, the Russian dictator watched what was happening with particular anxiety. That's why the Kremlin elder rushed to Beijing immediately after the US president's visit.
We haven't seen each other for a day, but it feels like 3 autumns have passed. We are truly very glad to see you. We constantly synchronize our watches, both personally and through our aides.
The visit is supposedly timed to coincide with the 25th anniversary of the Treaty of Good Neighborliness. China has extended visa-free travel between Russia and the PRC until December 31st, 2027. At the meeting, Putin and Xi signed a declaration on the establishment of a multipolar world and a new type of international relations.
It is based on the principles of equality and consideration of each other's interests, mutual support, friendship, and genuine good neighborliness.
But what is it really like in practice? Washington and Beijing are trying to reduce the level of confrontation and return relations to a more predictable course. But this is very bad news for the Kremlin. And the more stable the dialogue between the US and China, the less Russia's opinion is taken into account.
Putin closely followed the negotiations between Trump and Xi.
And now he wants to understand what the Americans actually offered China. What is Donald Trump trying to achieve? How seriously is Washington prepared to go regarding Iran? How far is the US willing to go regarding Ukraine? And isn't there a risk that one day Russia itself will become the subject of a major deal between Washington and Beijing? Because right now, a new diplomatic triangle is beginning to take shape: Moscow, Beijing, Washington. And at the center of this triangle, it is increasingly China that finds itself in the spotlight.
Putin brought along almost all of his loyal businessmen. There are 39 people in the Russian delegation. There you have Chechen, Miller, Timchenko, Guriev, Mikhelson, and the oligarch Deripaska.
Such delegations are not brought along just for pretty photographs. This is not diplomatic tourism, and it's not simply a show of friendship either. It looks like an attempt to negotiate something much bigger, something greater. And the main topic here, of course, is power of Siberia 2.
This is the last chance to persuade or at least try to reach an agreement with the leader of China. And this is already the 5th time the Russian dictator has gone to try to convince China to do business with Russia.
In the current tense situation on the international stage, our close partnership is especially in demand.
Putin still hopes that Xi will agree to build that very power of Siberia 2.
The main parameters of understanding regarding power of Siberia 2 are in place. There is agreement on the route and on how it will be constructed. Some details still need to be worked out, but overall, such an understanding already exists.
The Kremlin has been trying to negotiate the construction of a pipeline with a capacity of 50 billion cubic meters for almost 10 years.
Chinese officials have expressed interest in speeding up the negotiations. Although there has not been any significant progress so far, one of the Russian officials stated.
Since Putin launched a full-scale war against Ukraine, he has lost trade with all countries and become mired in sanctions.
The European gas market, which for decades was the foundation of Russian influence, is effectively lost. That means Moscow needs a new major buyer, one that is large and long-term.
And once again, China wants to get everything from Russia for free, just like with the forests and the land.
Due to the fact that gas supplies to European markets have largely ceased because of the war in Ukraine, Russia has increased its exports to Asia. It is expected that over the next few years, Russia will sell natural gas to China at about 1/3 less than the price in Europe. At the same time, the projected annual volume of deliveries to the east is expected to reach 52.5 billion cubic meters by 2029.
And what is there to say? Russians themselves are already ready to sell themselves to China.
In the event that the Russian Federation is unable to complete the construction of the school in our neighborhood, we asked the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Sergei Viktorovich Lavrov, to appeal to the chairman of the Communist Party of China, Xi Jinping, with a proposal to finance the construction of our school as part of the ethno-cultural diversity and the active development of cultural ties with China.
Xi has agreed to buy gas at almost domestic Russian rates, which is several times cheaper than the former European prices that Putin has lost.
By the way, he promises China, Bloomberg writes about this, for example, that Putin promised China incredible discounts of 30 or 40% compared to European prices for many years to come.
And it will be China that dictates the terms because they have alternatives, coal and renewable energy sources.
China's electricity consumption balance shows that 80% comes from coal and renewables, and there's hardly any gas there. Gas accounts for less than 5% of China's electricity generation mix.
But even if the contract is signed, it will take at least 5 years to build the power of Siberia 2. It will reach its design capacity in about 10 years.
The Ministry of Finance has made it very clear to Gazprom that it will not finance power of Siberia 2. Where will the money come from? As we just showed, Gazprom doesn't have any profit of its own.
Beijing has extended an economic helping hand to Moscow, helping it circumvent Western sanctions and increasing purchases of Russian energy resources, as well as supplying vital components for the Russian military-industrial complex.
And of course, Xi has every opportunity to put pressure on Putin, because without dual-use goods, without chips, and without many other things, nothing of Putin's will be able to fly, drive, or jump.
But if it becomes advantageous for China, Xi Jinping can quickly shut off the supply. And then the dictator in the Kremlin will have to end the brutal and bloody war in Ukraine once and for all.
Xi Jinping currently holds a significant number of strategic advantages and powerful leverage up his sleeves to effectively force Vladimir Putin to calm down and bring an end to this devastating and unprovoked full-scale military invasion. Of course, this does not necessarily mean that every single conflict will end immediately, but at the very least, the distinct possibility of establishing some kind of initial truce, followed by a further calming down of Putin's relentless and destructive military machine, is definitely there. At this very moment, the critical moment of truth, often referred to as our X, is finally striking across the entire region of the Caucasus. The Russian security services have officially started a coup. The FSB and GRU have launched a bloody operation to overthrow Pashinyan. Secret documents have been leaked online. How exactly is the Kremlin preparing to set the entire region on fire in order to hold on to its slipping power? Watch.
Russia is launching a political attack on Armenia. Against the backdrop of Yerevan's rapid rapprochement with the European Union, the Kremlin is trying at any cost to prevent Nikol Pashinyan's team from being re-elected in the parliamentary elections on June 7th.
As for Armenia's plans to join the European Union, that, of course, requires special consideration. This is a serious issue. Therefore, there is no need to take things to the extreme.
According to an investigation by The Insider, a large-scale influence operation against the Armenian Prime Minister was launched in Moscow. After setbacks in Moldova and Hungary, the Kremlin has focused specifically on Armenia, a country that is increasingly distancing itself from Russia and seeking support in the West.
Armenia has become a bridge between Europe and Asia. The European Union is an important long-term partner for Armenia and the entire region.
To coordinate the campaign, the Russian presidential administration even created a new department, the Department for Strategic Partnership and Cooperation. It is headed by Vadim Titov, a member of Sergei Kirienko's team. The Armenian direction is overseen by officials with experience in the special services and structures of the GRU and FSB. According to the publication, Russian state funds, soft power structures, Rosotrudnichestvo, as well as pro-Kremlin think tanks and political organizations have been mobilized against Pashinyan. It seems the Russian dictator is seriously concerned about Pashinyan's intentions.
Please, we won't be against it. But of course, we must keep in mind certain circumstances that are important both for us and for our partners.
The main task is to convince Armenian society that moving toward Europe is dangerous and that the country's future is possible only in alliance with Russia. All this is happening against the backdrop of a sharp cooling in relations between Yerevan and Moscow.
Well, for example, Our trade turnover with Armenia has decreased now. Last year and the year before, it was much higher. But still, $7 billion by 2025. And in my opinion, it would be, well, right, it would be both in relation to the population, the citizens of Armenia, and to us as the main economic partner to make a decision as soon as possible.
In recent months, Armenia has significantly intensified its contacts with the European Union. At the beginning of May, the European Political Community Summit and the EU-Armenia Summit were held in Yerevan. As a result of the meeting, a joint declaration of 44 points was signed, which Brussels called a historic milestone in relations with Armenia.
When we fully align ourselves with EU standards, we will have two options: to be accepted into the EU or not. And it is the European Union that will have to make this decision. We do not know yet. Perhaps the EU will decide not to expand further for one reason or another. But if we are accepted into the EU as a member state, we will be glad and happy.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen stated that Armenia's Crossroads of Peace initiative could turn the country into an important logistical bridge between Europe, the South Caucasus, and Central Asia. Nikol Pashinyan himself called these events historic for the entire country. Against this backdrop, Vladimir Putin publicly warned Armenia about the consequences of possible European integration. The Russian tyrant stated that if Yerevan chooses the path of joining the EU, Moscow will have to reconsider its relations with Armenia.
You see, we are now experiencing everything that is happening on the Ukrainian front. But how did it all start? With Ukraine joining or attempting to join the EU. That was just the first stage, only the first stage. Even back then, we started discussing this with the Europeans. We told them, listen, the phytosanitary standards in your countries, in the European Union and in Russia are completely different. Ultimately, all of these complex factors later paved the way for the political coup, the entire unfolding of the Crimean story, the specific geopolitical position of southeastern Ukraine, and the subsequent escalation into full-scale military actions across the region. That's what it all led to. This is a serious issue.
In addition to political pressure, the Kremlin reminds Armenia of its dependence on the Russian market, trade, and participation in the Eurasian Economic Union. Meanwhile, Pashinyan is demonstratively distancing himself from Moscow. The Armenian Prime Minister refused to go to Russia for the May 9th parade, citing the election campaign as the reason. Parliamentary elections in Armenia are now becoming more than just an internal vote. In fact, it is a matter of choosing the country's geopolitical course, either continuing the alliance with Russia or moving toward Europe.
Russia is plunging into a fiery hell. The newest ballistic fist of the Ukrainian armed forces is already in action. The hour of reckoning has come. Ukrainian missile titans have officially gone on the hunt. Moscow is doomed to total incineration. The deadly victors have already stormed in. Flamingos, ballistic FP-9S and more. This is the complete end and capitulation of the Russian Federation. Details in the report.
Ukrainian missiles have flown toward Moscow. After the massive attack on the Russian capital, the so-called war correspondents across the border are no longer mincing words. After all, just 50 kilometers from the Kremlin, the arrival of our cruise missiles was recorded. Ukraine has not officially confirmed their use, but judging by the scale of the aftermath, an ordinary drone couldn't have done this.
What is this?
At the same time, today in Russian social media, there are suggestions that after the drones, it was specifically Ukrainian flamingos that came to visit the White Stone City.
After the drones flew over, which they shot down, for example, with S-300 missiles, and then when some Ukrainian drone missile flies in, they simply don't have enough resources left. Again, let's remember that there are certain regulations regarding, for example, the reloading of air defense systems. And imagine when their fancy air defense systems are stationed on towers, and this, for example, means it takes a long time to reload the ammunition. We understand what kind of time gap occurs between the opportunity to intercept an aerial target and destroy it.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian missiles are flying into Russia as if it were their own home. Here, for example, are some shots from a week ago. So Sheboksary, which had never before encountered Ukrainian missiles and drones, has now become acquainted with our flamingos. As it became known, the target of the missiles was the JSC Vnaire Progress Plant, a facility of the Russian Federation's military-industrial complex. The enormous range of these missiles and their impressive warheads promise many more unpleasant surprises for the Russian invaders deep behind the lines.
This is an ordinary cruise missile. It has been somewhat simplified in order to enable rapid mass production. Well, generally speaking, cruise missiles are usually launched from containers or from aircraft. But it's difficult for us to launch a heavy missile from an aircraft, right? And container launches require the engine and the wings to be housed inside the missile's body, right? So that's not very convenient. If we want to maximize the internal volume for placing explosives, then of course it's better to do it the way it has been done here. That is, the wings are fixed and the engine is mounted above the fuselage, also outside the missile body.
When it comes to the internal configuration, the Flamingo has a significant difference from most of its cruise missile counterparts. The warhead weighs over a ton, making it more powerful than the legendary Tomahawk. The American Democracy Axe has a warhead of only 450 kilograms. At the same time, the plant in Cheboksary is not the only success for the Flamingo this year. Earlier missiles had already struck a facility in Udmurtia, which is 1,400 kilometers from the front line, and for over a month now, this has prevented the resumption of production.
You have to understand, this isn't just the production of Iskanders. They produce Bulava there, components for the Bulava ballistic submarines. Right now, we have shut down its production. Topol M, a ground-based missile system, operational, tactical, and its modifications, and YARS, which has extended range, and the same damned Oreshnik with reduced range. So, by and large, I would say this is Web 2.0, and the Americans, and whoever else, the countries involved in the nuclear standoff, can applaud and thank Ukraine for weakening the missile potential of the Russian nuclear triad.
The Russian nuclear triad.
However, the makers of the Flamingo also have new products that the world has not yet seen in action. At the same time, according to rumors, they are already ready for use.
And this is truly a complete catastrophe for the Russian Federation.
The Ukrainian ballistic missile called FP9 has already caused quite a stir in the military community. After all, according to its technical specifications, it can reach the Russian capital, both the legal and the cultural one.
The FP7 is a kind of replacement for the ATACMS. It's cheap, has a short range, 300 kilometers, and a lightweight. The FP9 is its counterpart, 800 kilometers with an 850 kilogram warhead. Or, well, 850 kilometers with an 800 kilogram warhead.
That very FP9 is currently the most advanced version of Ukrainian ballistic missiles, capable of flying over 800 kilometers. It will probably become the first serious threat to Moscow. After all, it's a domestic development, so partners won't be able to tell the Ukrainian armed forces where and how to use it.
Ukraine is fighting for its independence, so the desire to be independent is deeply ingrained in us. Right now, we can't be completely independent in terms of skills and materials, but we are trying to minimize imports and rely on local production as much as possible. We are largely dependent on the help of our partners for funding, intelligence, expertise to develop the entire ecosystem, as well as for general political support at various levels. When it comes to skills and equipment, we try to do everything ourselves.
Analysts are confident that it is precisely domestically produced missiles that will become Ukraine's most important argument in the upcoming negotiations. Well, before that happens, it seems that the Russian capital, and not only it, will have to encounter several more innovations from the Ukrainian defense industry so that there are no questions left.
That's all for now. And for more fiery news from the front, tune in to our next episode.